Go Ask Alice is a show intended for adult audiences, because adults want to learn too. Sometimes we cover sensitive material, so please take care of yourselves, and listener discretion is advised. Now on to the show. Hello, internet friends, and welcome back to another episode of Go Ask Alice, the show where we jump down random internet rabbit holes and bring you wonderful factoids from our adventures in Wiki Wonderland. I'm Drew, and I'm a bad bitch. With me is...
I'm Lindsay, and I never need my receipt. Thank you.
And I'm Sarah, and I really like big things of Australia.
Thank you for that prepositional phrase.
All the big things.
This is the show where we jump down random internet rabbit holes. We all start out on the same wiki page every week, and then we navigate away from that page separately behind the scenes using hyperlinks within the article or outside, basically just using links, until we land somewhere that we cannot stop reading. This is something that has completely captured our attention, and we are bursting with excitement to share it with each other and with all of you. This week, we started on a very special page because of a very special person. We started on the page for Waffles, and this is all in honor of our best friend in the whole world, Michelle, otherwise known as Gunshizer on Twitch. Michelle has agreed, finally, to partner with us and give us all of her chaos in exchange for all of our education, because you know that's totally why you're here.
That's our big announcement that's been going down on Twitter. If you follow Lindsay's Twitter countdowns.
Thank you. Yes, I should have probably said that. I just assume everybody follows on Twitter. So if you also would like to choose our starting page or our question of the week, that is something that is also available on our Patreon, which is also recently launched. So if you feel like it, find us on Patreon and come hang out with us even more.
Even more.
We started on Waffles because of Michelle.
Yes. Yes.
Where did everybody else end up?
Well, once again, I didn't go too far. I ended up on maple syrup.
You didn't go too far.
Which is my favorite thing in the fucking world. I love maple syrup. I didn't go too far because I love maple syrup. Who doesn't love it?
It is great. I mean, the fact that you can tap a tree.
Yeah.
Incredible.
True. I would drink maple syrup out of a flask like all day if I could.
Yeah, right? Mm-hmm. It's good.
I ended up on amphisbaena.
Amphisbaena? Do you have to say it in a southern accent as well?
You say it every way you want. Amphisbaena.
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 I'm so keen to learn what that is. Is it a person?
I don't know.
Oh, Lindsay
Who
just
knows?
shrugged. Who knows? Well, okay, you are not going to expect where I landed, and I think it's so ironic that we got some maple syrup because I feel like it's a good condiment to go with things that you eat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I landed on corpse medicine.
Sarah, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Let me pause. Everybody, okay, we're recording this on Discord, which you know by now, and there's a Discord channel called Spoilers, and earlier Sarah put in a spoiler that was just a screenshot that says, "What did it taste like? Not good." And now I'm horrified.
I'm so excited. Yeah, classic good old corpse medicine.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Did you try it?
No, but the Victorians definitely did.
Okay, because you made it seem like you tried it.
Oh, no. They were my notes. That was an antidote from someone because I obviously had to Google what did it taste like.
Oh my God, I can't wait.
Historians have said not good. We got a sidetrack from corpses and we got to move on to toilets. So our question of the week this week is, what do you do when you're on the toilet?
Thank you, Michelle, for asking us and everybody else.
Excellent question.
So I guess this is a good time to say that Gunshizer, Michelle's Twitch handle, it means battle shits, which is a great game. My brother taught me that you just yell like B4 and then let loose. Which girls don't do. That's like a whole other... We'll talk about girl bathroom etiquette later. Anyway, what do you do when you're on the toilet, Drew?
What do? This is a problem. I do many things. Number one is I play. My parents would actually find this very funny. I play on my my PSP, and my parents call it my PSP and poo, which it's like so classic in my family that I do this that it's become the PSP and poo.
So you just toddle to the toilet with your little PSP. You're like, I'll go take a poo.
Go take a poo, and oh my god, I'd spend way too long on the toilet. But then I also I've mentioned this previously. I browse a lot of dating apps while I'm on there, which is fun as hell.
Again, ladies, he is single and ready to mingle. Drew's a catch.
And then the third thing I do is I browse a lot of Reddit. So it's like video games, dating apps, and Reddit. That's my like bathroom time.
Good.
It's a good time.
It's a good healthy balance.
It's a good healthy balance.
Good circuit.
A good circuit.
I think that's great. What do you do, Lindsay?
I pretty much exclusively go to... There's like a part of Snapchat that's like horrible news. Like it's just like absolute junk tabloids. And so I just like fill my brain with garbage. It's just like all the celebrity gossip, or then it's like, I survived vacation nightmare boat accident, and like all kind of like horrible shit.
Excellent.
But I'm not the only one, because we had tons of submission answers to this question. And I'll remind you guys, again, I'm sure you already know this. Go Ask Alice Pod, Go Ask Alice Podcast. That's Twitter and Instagram, respectively. If you want to be featured on Question of the Week with your answer, just drop us a line below. It's also in our Discord channel. We have a separate channel for Question of the Week. So piling all of this in one neat pile, we have Swash Plate from our Discord says, reflect on life or watch videos. Not too dissimilar from what we have said. Jeff E. Spaghetti says, play Fire Emblem, which I guess is not too different than PSP and poop.
PSP and poop.
PSP and poop.
And Gunshizer herself said, stare angrily at the floor only to remember that I'm about to use my bidet, which I guess cheers her up. But what I love about this is that while I was in the bathroom, Michelle sent me a Snapchat of her in the bathroom because I said, I'm on Snapchat all the time in the bathroom. Michelle sent me a Snapchat video of herself smoking weed and said, I guess I do this while I'm on the toilet. And I'm like, Michelle, like, fire and toilet is a really bad idea. And she was like, no, it's
but
fine.
But she's got a bidet.
That's what she said. But then she tried to demonstrate, and she got it all over the floor, and the video abruptly stopped.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. Our Twitch affiliate, everyone.
Twitch affiliate.
Only the best from twitch.com.
Well, I kind of identify with Michelle, because sometimes I'll just like, if I grab a little snack, like, because anyone who knows me knows that I pee 1,000 times a day. I think at this point it could be a medical issue, but I need to pee constantly. And so, like, that interrupts my day of, like, if I only have 15-minute break and I got to go pee, I'll, like, grab my snack and eat it while I pee. Is that gross?
Yeah, there's something particularly cursed about eating in the bathroom.
But that's, like, in my own home bathroom. Maybe we can edit that out. That's cursed.
No, I love it. No.
We'll go a little, I'm busy, got a snack.
You're putting it in one end and letting it out the other.
Yeah, you're replenishing the stock.
Oh Gross.
You guys are so cursed. Sarah's eating as we're saying that.
You guys are so gross. Nom, nom, nom.
Sarah could be in the bathroom right now. She's having a snack. She could be in the bathroom.
Snack.
So who are we going to start with this week? It could be fun to do number of clicks, because my interesting fact right now is that I only went 6 clicks away from our original starting page. Yes. It's kind of horrifying.
Oh, crap. I think I went like 30 clicks, probably.
Okay. Drew went 2. Drew, I'm honestly surprised it took you 2. I would have thought 1.
No,
Drew.
it was 2. It was 2.
Okay, tell us all about maple syrup.
Maple syrup? Well, I feel like I've have a brand now. It's just like a common thing that you know, and here's the history behind it. Like, I feel like I've got a brand.
Okay.
That is your brand, and you own it.
That's your brand.
So, I'm just going to say this from the beginning. I really hope our audience is familiar with maple syrup, because it's the best thing in the fucking world. And if you're not familiar with maple syrup, I don't know how to help you. Just get maple syrup. It's great. So I'm going to start out, of course, as everyone knows, by defining my topic. I'm not unhinged this week. So maple syrup...
You've been unhinged once.
I've been unhinged once. It's too much. Okay, so maple syrup is a syrup that is usually made from the xylem sap, which is part of the plant circulatory system, of sugar maples, red maples, or black maple trees. So that's like, I don't know, that's got a lot to it. It's basically a syrup made from sap from trees. That's the long and short of it. And there are, of course, other species of maple trees that can be used, but those 3 are the kind of the main species that are used. So in cold climates, these trees store starch in their trunks and roots before winter, and then this starch is then converted to sugar that rises in the sap later in the winter, in late winter or early spring. So the sap rises up the tree, which is why it's the xylem sap, because xylem...
like little veins.
Yeah, xylem is like little veins, because there's xylem and phloem. These words sound stupid, but these are the actual words for the plant circulatory system. So xylem is like as Sarah said, it's like veins that go up the tree, while phloem is kind of just everywhere, and that's how they get their oxygen, or not oxygen, CO2. And, you know what they do.
Their version of oxygen.
Oxygen, yeah.
You know what trees do.
You know what trees do. So maybe I'll talk about that later. That's great. It's another great topic. So maple trees are actually tapped by drilling holes in their trunks, which I'm sure we know a little bit about, but this is actually known as the European way of doing it. This is not the native way of doing, of tapping a tree.
Milking a tree.
So the Europeans is very much drill, and the native way is a little bit different. And then the rising sap is then collected, and the sap is then processed by heating to evaporate much of the water, and then the sap is thereby concentrated into syrup. So that's kind of how maple syrup is made. So maple syrup, of course, was first made by the indigenous people of North America, and this practice was then adopted by European settlers, who eventually changed the production method for maple syrup. Just kind of with technological improvements and different things like that, they really changed the method.
Wait, so what? Oh, sorry. What was it that Native people did? What was their strategy?
So the tapping was a little bit different. They'd carve a slight V into the tree, and then leave the tap at the bottom of the V. And the incision wasn't so much. They call it an incision. And it wasn't so deep as as like boring a hole into the tree, and so it was a little bit kinder to the trees. I'm just fantasizing about this, but it's a little less destructive to the trees than like literally drilling a hole in it. So that's like the inherent difference. But they may not have gotten as much of like a syrup yield from the tree, but I feel like it was just kinder to the tree. So that's me.
Got you.
Actually, when it comes to the 1970s, because the technological improvements really not only happened, but basically like the real technological improvements to like syrup making actually happened in the 1970s. Like this basically further refined the process of making syrup. So, virtually all of the world's maple syrup is produced in Canada and the US, with the Canadian province of Quebec being the biggest producer of syrup. So Quebec is actually responsible for 70% of the world's output. 70%. That's like
Jeez.
ridiculous. That's like
Wow.
And don't they have maple syrup reserves as well?
Yes, they do.
To hold value?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I would so love to have maple syrup investments. They wouldn't last very long. I'd eat it all.
But if we remember back to our coffee episode, or like the coffee episode, talking about Brazil was only like 35% of the world. This is 70% of the world's output is coming from Quebec. So that's just
huge.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
So it's just ridiculous. So Canadian exports in maple syrup in 2016 reached up to $360 million in U.S. currency, which is also huge.
Holy moly.
And that year, Quebec accounted for 90% of the total exports from Canada. 90%.
Wow, go Quebec.
Go
I always
Quebec.
say it's liquid gold when I'm eating it, and it like kind of is.
It kind of is. It really is. So, a fun fact, maple syrup is actually graded according to the US, Canada, and Vermont scales. And that's based on the density and the translucency of the syrup in question, which we will get into a little bit later, because I found that grading scale to be very, very funny.
Do you want... Is it like a diamond? Do you want it to be more translucent?
That depends.
Or do you want it to be...
That depends. That depends on what
I
kind of...
cannot wait to be an expert in this.
Me too. Next time I'm at IHOP spinning their syrup around, like fine wine. It's
Yeah.
not as thick as I like it.
The tannins in this syrup.
Is this grade A? We'll get to that. We'll get to it.
I mostly just want to know enough to go to the supermarket and just like shove them aside on the shelf and be like, this is shit.
This is garbage.
Not this. Grade A? I don't think so.
Great. Oh my god! Wow, that's not gonna happen. Grade A is the top, so you're not gonna be able to push it away.
Make me picky.
Okay, I will. So, so as an aside that I found really cool, sucrose is actually the most prevalent sugar in maple syrup, and not glucose. So that's just like a little science fact for you. That's where the taste comes from. It's sucrose. But
Is that still a sugar?
yes, 100%. Well, it's got os at the end
Just
of
a
it.
different sugar.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like a different structured sugar. So in Canada, syrups must be made exclusively from maple sap to qualify as maple syrup, and must also be at least 66% sugar. In the US, the rules are a little bit less strict. So the syrup must be made almost entirely of maple sap to be labeled as maple. Though the states of Vermont and New York tend to have much stricter restrictions for their definitions of maple syrup. So it's depends on where you're from, but you know, in the US it's kind of like it almost has to be full of maple syrup, but it's not entirely. So, but Canada, you get the real stuff.
Do you have golden syrup in the US?
I don't know what
Have you
that
heard
is.
of that?
I don't know what
We
that
have
is.
that here in Australia, and it's like a budget maple syrup. But I wonder if it's still... I thought it was just like a man-made syrup, but I wonder if it's still a tree syrup, but not from maple trees.
Yeah, there was a whole section in the Wikipedia article about I almost said fakes. That's not the right word for it, but like imitations.
authentic.
Imitations, that's the
Yeah.
one. And I didn't really fully get into that, but there was a whole section about imitations and how like it's like a man-made thing that uses like a small percent of maple syrup, so they can say it's kind of maple syrup, but it's not actually maple syrup because it's
Cheeky.
all man-made. Exactly. So culinary experts have praised the unique flavor of maple syrup. But what I found very funny was the chemistry responsible for the actual taste of maple syrup is not actually fully understood. It's just like we don't fully get it. We don't know why it
We
tastes
don't
so
know
good.
why it's so magical and yummy.
Exactly.
Tree secrets.
Tree secrets.
How do they do it?
You know, I kind of found this to be a little funny because it feels like we have a lot of things that just work and we don't have any idea why they work, but they work.
Yeah.
Notably, like a lot of psychiatric medication. I don't know why I'm on this topic, but a lot of
No.
psychiatric medication, we have no idea how it works, but we just know it works.
Yeah.
It's like maple syrup. There you go. That's the connection.
There we go. Antidepressants, maple syrup.
Maple syrup. There you
one
go.
in a kind.
One in a kind. We don't know either.
That's how Drew and I are surviving right now. Antidepressants,
Maple syrup. And maple syrup.
And Lindsay, sorry, I assume that you're just more mentally stable than me.
No, I've just been taking the same
Wow.
antidepressants for like 15 years.
For years.
It's just very well built up in my system.
It makes us all funnier.
So now I want to actually get into the sources of maple syrup a little bit more in depth. As I mentioned, the specific trees that the syrup comes from, but I just wanted to get a little bit more into, it's not just 3 tree species. There's more than that. Ooh. So as I said, predominantly maple syrup comes from the 3 tree species: the sugar maple, which is Acer saccharum, the black maple, which is Acer nigrum, and then the red maple, which is Acer rubrum. The Acer being the genus, and then the other one being the species. Due to the high sugar content, roughly 2 to 5% in the sap of these species produce. So they have a high sugar content, which is why we use them, which makes sense because you want to have good maple syrup. So of these tree species, the red maple has the shortest season because it buds earlier than the sugar and black maples, which actually alters the flavor of the sap. So one thing that I mentioned later, the earlier you harvest the sap, the lighter the syrup is and sweeter the taste, because as you go later in the season, it becomes a more darker taste and you get more of like the full maple versus a little bit of the sugary taste to it. So there's a big difference between, the beginning of the season versus the end of the
Barrel
season.
aged.
And we'll get to the grading.
Yeah.
It's
Maple aged.
Definitely isn't. Definitely isn't.
It's the same thing as being barrel aged.
It is.
No, it's completely different.
But it's a woody
It's
taste,
a fuller flavor
right?
because it's...
Yeah. I bet it's the same chemistry.
I think I've got this figured out. I think everyone is like, oh, we don't know how maple syrup works. No one asked me. Barrel aged.
I don't think that's right, but I don't know enough about maple syrup to deny it. So
It's just like it's tree wine.
I disagree because I don't think you don't boil wine to make it.
No, okay, it's fair
Anyway,
enough. But
You don't
it's
boil
very
maple
different.
syrup
you
either.
do put it in wood.
Yes, you do. You 100% boil it.
Oh.
Well, I wouldn't know that because nobody taught me that yet.
I thought it just came out of the tree, good to go. Like I thought you could go
No,
stick
no,
your mouth
100%
on
not.
it and down some premium maple syrup. No?
No, God, no. God, no.
That takes my fantasy away from living in Canada one day.
The image I posted is of maple syrup being produced. That's like the sap that they like that
I forgot
black stuff,
about
that brown stuff.
image.
Yeah, that's the
Shit,
sap.
that makes so much sense.
Yeah, that's the sap. There you go.
God, I thought that image was of Guinness.
No, that's sap. So, oh my God. Anyway, a few other species of maple, the genus Acer, are also sometimes used as sources for maple syrup. And these include the box elder or the Manitoba maple, which is Acer niganto, the silver maple, which is Acer saccharium, and then the big leaf maple, which is Acer macrophyllum, which I just love that name because it's like big leaf. And it's literally like its name is big leaf, so it's great. So in the southeastern United States, there's actually a Florida sugar maple, which is very different from the regular sugar maple, but still does produce similar sap to it, and that's Acer floridinum. And this is actually used for maple syrup production. So the North doesn't have a complete domination of the syrup market. It can actually be moved a little bit further southeast, depending on what we want to do. Similar syrups can actually be produced from walnut trees, birch trees, and even palm trees. But I really
Palm trees.
Yeah, palm trees. But I really don't think I'm going to be putting palm syrup on my pancakes anytime soon. So
I'll try it.
You try it?
I would try it, yeah.
I don't know if I would. Pancakes are sacred. Pancakes and maple syrup are sacred to me. I wanted to get into the history of maple syrup because I absolutely love this syrup and really wanted to know who to thank for this great topping.
Yes.
So as I mentioned earlier, the first people to actually make maple syrup were indigenous people living in the northeastern parts of North America. So these were the first groups known to produce both maple syrup and maple sugar specifically. But of course, there could have been other groups that do it, but this is just like the first that we know of. So I feel like that kind of applies to all history of these kind of things. It's just like it could have been produced before that, but this is all we know.
So how long ago was it first figured out that this was a thing?
They actually didn't specify a date. They never really gave a date for this.
Yeah.
They just kind of because there's really no quote unquote authentic accounts before Europeans entered the equation. So that's during the European colonization period. So there were no real like recordings of this, but there was archaeological evidence, but they really didn't give a date based off of the archaeological evidence. So I would love to give you a date, but I don't have one.
No, I guess it's tough. I would just love to know if it's before or after like coffee.
That'd be great to know, but
Yeah, timeline of delicious foods. You can imagine though, the person who came back to the group and was like, "You will not fucking believe what I just found in this tree. Like, it tastes like gold." I'm sure they would have been a hero. Absolute hero.
Well, we'll get into a few of the oral traditions of the indigenous people and how it kind of like how these myths came about of like the discovery of maple syrup. So, according to the oral traditions, according to the indigenous oral traditions and the archaeological evidence that we found, maple tree sap was being processed into syrup long before Europeans arrived in the region. So, as I said, there were no real authentic accounts, quote unquote, authentic accounts of how maple syrup production and consumption began, but various legends do exist. With one of the most popular involving maple sap being used in place of water to cook venison served to a chief. And so that's like kind of the origin story of it is like, oh, we, instead of using water, we used maple sap and it tasted great. So why don't we just continue doing that?
That would have tasted great, like a glazed meat.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. So
coming from a vegetarian, just anything that's glazed, I'm like, yeah, that sounds really good.
That's funny. That's funny that you're just like, meat. Anyway.
More the glaze.
So indigenous tribes actually developed rituals around sugar making and would celebrate the sugar moon, which is the first full moon of the spring, with what is called the maple dance.
The sugar moon?
Yeah, the sugar moon.
The sugar moon. I love that.
That sounds so fun. That sounds
That does sound awesome.
I want to worship maple syrup and then incorporate the moon.
We can.
Yeah, the sugar moon. We can. We definitely can. But yeah, they would celebrate it with the maple dance. And that was, that's like a very, very honored tradition of a lot of indigenous peoples, indigenous tribes. And what I found, this is like my favorite fact about this, is many Aboriginal dishes actually replace the salt that's traditionally used in European cuisine with maple sugar or syrup. Ooh. So like they completely, you know how we salt everything. They're actually using syrup or maple sugar for everything, which is like completely blew my mind that they made everything sweet versus being savory.
It would have tasted so much better because the Europeans salted everything mainly to preserve it, right?
Yeah.
It was less of a taste thing, more of a I don't want to die.
I want to think of like putting, like dousing things with maple syrup as like preserving it in amber.
Oh, it'd be delicious.
The Algonquins actually they recognized maple sap as a source of energy and nutrition. So that was like their big thing, is they realized how important maple syrup was to
especially
to
through
keeping
the
them
winter.
alive. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of the spring thaw, they would, as I said, they would make the V-shaped incisions in tree trunks. And then they would insert reeds or concave pieces of bark to run the sap into clay buckets or tightly woven birch bark baskets. We'll start saying that 3 times fast. Birch bark
baskets.
So the maple sap was then concentrated by leaving it exposed to cold temperatures overnight and then removing the layer of ice that formed on top of the sap. So basically they did a freeze concentration.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
instead
exactly.
of evaporating it off, they just like let it.
So that was like the first step towards making syrup, is they'd remove that layer of ice, and then they'd further concentrate it by boiling. So the sap was then transported by sled to large fires that were used to boil the sap in clay pots to produce maple syrup. So one thing that the article said was also contrary to popular belief, syrup was not actually produced by dropping heated stones in wooden bowls, that was like not a way they did it. How they did it was literally just like pretty much the same way we produce it now is take it in, boil it, and then you end up with your syrup. So that was like a common misconception. So now, of course,
I never thought that. How did people think that?
Yeah.
Apparently that was the common misconception about how syrup was being produced. So that's you can ask Wikipedia. That's what they said.
That's a record straight. Yeah, thank you.
Set the record straight. Now, of course, we get to the European colonization. So this is Northeast North America. So during this time, local indigenous people actually showed the arriving colonists how to tap trunks of certain types of maple trees during the spring thaw to harvest sap. So André Thivet, who was the royal cosmographer of France, wrote that Jacques Cartier drank maple syrup during his Canadian voyages. And Cartier is actually the person who named Canada. I think he was after two Aborigine tribes. I think their two towns were something, I don't remember exactly what, but he gave the name Canada to Canada. So by 1680, European settlers and fur traders were actually involved in the harvest of maple products. However, rather than making incisions in the bark, as I said, the Europeans would literally drill tap holes in trunks using an auger. And I don't know if you two are familiar with an auger. But
Wait, you mean like not somebody who reads bird symbols?
Not an augurist?
Not an augurist, no, an auger.
Is it a drill?
Exactly a drill. But you might be very familiar with a wine bottle opener.
Yeah.
That's a very small auger. So that style of drill that you see, that's an auger.
I see.
Got you.
So you can impress someone at a party like, oh, give me the wine auger.
I don't go
what
to
the hell?
parties.
The only parties that would go over well are parties that Drew and I both happen to be at. I'll let you do that.
Lindsay would be at the back, be like, oh, he said the thing.
Bring me the wine auger.
I require the wine auger to open this bottle.
I think it's such a shame that you were not born into royalty back in the day, Drew, because you would have been an incredible throne sitter and demander of things. I require the auger.
Is that what I sound like? Oh, I hope not.
That was so mean to Sarah just now.
Was that?
Savage. No, I think it's my Aussie accent, which doesn't help. It's okay, Drew. I get it. I sound like shit.
Wow, I hope I don't sound anything like Sarah. That's what Drew just said.
No, it was funny. It's funny.
That's not what I meant, because you did an American accent, and I was like, I hope I don't sound like that.
Did I? I thought I was doing a British accent.
Wow.
Oh, that was a... Anyway, so prior to the 19th century, the processing of maple sap was actually primarily used as a source of concentrated sugar, so in both liquid and crystallized solid form, because cane sugar at the time needed to be imported from the West Indies and was therefore much harder to get compared to making maple sap. Basically, all of the sugar sources were actually coming from maple sugar and not cane sugar, which is very different from what we have now, because now cane sugar is more readily available, so it wasn't such a problem to make.
Yeah, I'm like really jealous of these people who are like, oh, it's just cheaper to have maple syrup. Like,
yeah, maple sugar. It's like, yeah. So maple sugaring groups typically began to operate at the start of the spring thaw. So they would work in regions of woodland with sufficiently large numbers of maples, of course, because you need maples to make maple syrup. So syrup makers first bored holes in trunks and would usually put more than one hole per tree. And so you'd end up having like a few bored holes in each tree, and then you'd have, they'd insert a wooden spout into the holes and then hang a wooden bucket from the protruding end of the spout to collect the sap. And what I found very interesting was that these buckets themselves were typically made by hollowing cylindrical segments of large tree trunks. So basically they'd cut the tree down and then take a large cylindrical part of it and then just hollow that out, and then that would be their bucket. Yeah, right?
Oh no.
The poor tree.
That's their stock though.
Yeah, but it's like, it feels like almost tree cannibalism. It's like the corpse of a tree is collecting the blood of another tree.
Spoken like a true vegetarian.
Thank you.
I think that's just your lens, Sarah.
They needed buckets, so
Yeah, they made a bucket. So the sap that filled these buckets was either transferred to large holding vessels, which were mounted to sleds or wagons and pulled by draft animals, or were literally carried in other buckets or other containers from like place to place. So it wasn't, like they'd have the tap collector, or sorry, the sap collector, and then that would be dumped into another bucket, which would be transported elsewhere. So basically you just constantly have a bucket on the sap collector just to collect sap.
that's lots of manual labor along the way.
Yeah, that's a lot of manual labor. So this isn't an easy process.
Yeah.
So the sap collector buckets were actually, as I said, were returned to the spouts until the sap being collected was no longer quote unquote sweet. So the specific weather conditions of the thaw period, and very much this is very much true for now, they're critical in determining the length of the sugaring season. So as the weather continues to warm, a maple tree's normal early spring biological processes eventually alter the taste of the sap, making it unpalatable. So there's only a very specific time period that you can like tap a tree, because the sap isn't going to be good otherwise. And this could be due to the increase in amino acids within the sap that occurs at this stage in the season. So we don't really know why it's so bad, but there is a large increase in amino acids.
This still sounds like barrel aging.
I don't think it does. You're not barrel aging. You're boiling it and then putting it, then serving it. Like,
is a tree not a barrel?
That's like asking me if like a taco is a sandwich. Like,
It is.
Okay, we're moving on.
Moving on. So the boiling process to make maple syrup is actually very time consuming, and the harvesting of sap poured into large vessels, as like you'd pour a lot of sap into these large vessels, and then you'd have to boil them in these large vessels. So this was done either using a fire built out in the open or inside a shelter known as a sugar shack. And so that's where we get the term sugar shack from, is the the small, not small, but the building you would use to boil your sap. So there's sugar shack.
What about Waffle House?
So around the time of the Civil War, the American Civil War, I should say, 1861 to 1865, syrup makers actually started to use large flat metal sheets, like sheet pans, that were used to make boiling much more efficient, because you had this you had larger surface area. And instead of these like heavy rounded iron kettles that they were using previously, they'd use these like large flat not buckets, but pans, and then they'd boil it in that, and that would increase the efficiency of boiling. So around this time, cane sugar began to replace maple sugar as the dominant sweetener in the U.S. And as a result, producers actually focused marketing efforts on maple syrup only. So now they just, instead of going for like, we produce both, maple sugar and maple syrup, they're just like 100%, let's go straight to maple syrup. That's it. So that was kind of the big switch is once cane sugar kind of began to be available. So the first evaporator, which is used to heat and concentrate sap, was patented in 1858. And then by 1872, an evaporator with two pans and a metal firebox was invented, which greatly decreased the boiling times. And basically from here on, there's not too much technological developments up until, as I said, the 1970s. Around 1900, producers bent tin that formed the bottom of their pans into a series of flues that increased the heating surface area, and then that of course decreased boiling time. So now you have a more efficient boiling because you have these little flues that are allowing for a greater surface area.
I love the idea of like an old-timey kind of like chemistry set just for maple syrup.
Just for maple syrup? Yeah, I love that too. That's, oh my God.
Like there's like a Bunsen burner on one end, and then there's like a bunch of like all these pipes going around, and then there's like a little concentrated little cup, and then I'm just waiting for it to go through the...
That'd be great. That'd be so great. So some fancy producers actually added a finishing pan, which was a separate batch evaporator at a final stage in the evaporation process to, help sweeten the final product. And so that like not every place did that, but some places did that. And then buckets began to be replaced with plastic bags. To me, I felt like they tied one of those grocery bags at the end, but it must have been like a much more sturdier plastic bag. But I was just like, grocery bags when they said plastic bags, but that's
Reduce
besides
and
the point.
reuse. That's good.
So plastic bags had the advantage that they'd allow people to see from a distance how much sap had been collected, so you wouldn't have to go check every single barrel and be like, oh, did this collect? No, it didn't. All right, move on to the next one. So you just be able to see it visually.
Well, the Canadians love putting liquids in bags, like the milk.
I guess, I mean, it's more efficient.
Yeah, it is efficient.
Yeah, it's efficient. We'll go with that. So syrup producers also began to use tractors to haul vats, like vats of sap, from trees being tapped to evaporators, and then some producers even adopted motor-powered tappers with metal tubing systems that conveyed the sap from like the tree to a central collection container. But this technique wasn't really widely used because it was so expensive just to, it was easier to pay manpower than it was to build this new method.
Yeah.
Now we move into the technological changes of the 1970s, because this is the big one that really changed how sap was collected and syrup was produced. In the 1970s, plastic tubing systems became much more prevalent. Now the sap came directly from the tree to the evaporator house. And then they had vacuum pumps, which were added to the tubing systems, which with preheaters, they used that to recycle heat loss from the steam. These preheaters would recycle the heat loss into heating up the tubing so that the maple syrup was like at a higher ambient temperature when it was entering the vat. So it wasn't coming in cold, it was coming in much hotter because they were recycling the steam. Producers also developed a reverse osmosis machine, which take a portion of the water out of the sap before it was boiled. So once again, this increased the processing efficiency. And I don't know if you two are familiar with reverse osmosis. Are you?
No, I've heard the term, but I don't know what it means.
I'm glad you asked, even though you probably didn't.
Unlock the secret level.
So reverse osmosis actually involves using a partially permeable membrane where you apply external pressure to it. And that allows the solute to be retained on the pressurized side of the membrane, and the pure solvent is allowed to pass through to the other side. So basically what this means is the water passes freely to the other side of the membrane while the syrup is going to remain on the pressurized side. So you're basically pulling out water just through, I wouldn't call it a chemical process. It's a chemical biological process. Yeah.
I have seen this done on a chemistry channel. Yeah, I've seen a reverse osmosis setup. Yeah, I think if you Google hot sauce from toilet paper, it will come up.
Now that I'm thinking about that, I wanted to end off on the current grading system that we use to grade maple syrup, which is what I referred to in the beginning. This grading system is rather simple. It's just, so maple syrup is graded in one of the following three grades. It's grade A, processing grade, or substandard. So that's like, those are the three grades. So grade A, of course, is the highest grade and is broken down further into 4 different grades depending on the type of maple syrup that's being graded. So there's golden color with delicate taste, amber color with rich taste, dark color with robust taste, and finally very dark color with strong taste. So those are the 4 categories of grade A, which...
Robust taste.
Yeah, robust taste.
I can't tell if that's good or bad.
Basically, the article said that as you get further down into like the darker maple syrups, that tends to have a very, very mapley taste to it and not so much of a sweet taste to it. And so that's used in more of baking versus being used to like pour on a waffle or a pancake or something. That's the lighter stuff, that like the amber and the golden is what you actually put on the you put on your pancakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the next is processing grade, which means that the syrup may have either like a slightly off flavor, may not be uniform in color, or might have some turbidity or sediments in it. And if any of these are true, the syrup is labeled as processing grade, which may not be sold in containers smaller than 5 US gallons or 20 liters.
Oh my God.
So you basically can't buy processing grade unless you want a ton of it.
I want a ton of it. How much do you think a 5-gallon thing of maple syrup is?
But this is processing grade. It might be like, it might not taste like maple syrup.
I bet it still
Yeah.
tastes great.
No, it means that you still have to do things to it to make it edible.
Well, probably boil it more. That's why they call it processing
I'd boil
grade.
it. If you're getting a bargain.
You really want 20 liters of maple syrup.
Drew just went through everything you'd have to do. There's no way that's a bargain.
I found one. I found a pail of pure Vermont maple syrup. It's
pail.
$234 for 5 gallons.
Wow. Well, that's probably grade A.
It says perfect for restaurants, bakeries, breweries, and food and beverage producers.
That's great.
That's grade A.
Oh, okay, that's the good stuff.
That's
They
the good
should also
stuff,
put end for your household needs.
So if the syrup does not meet any of these requirements for processing grade, which includes basically not having the characteristic taste of maple syrup, it is classified as substandard, which cannot be sold. So any substandard type of syrup you're not going to get.
Do you know what happens to it if it gets that rating?
I think it's just kind of, they may process it more, or they may just look at it as lost, like a lost cause and just get rid of it. So I don't really know.
They could use it for like calorie substitute on, like for animal feed and things like that. Like
They definitely could. I didn't see anything on the wiki article that said like how they use it, but I think if it gets graded as substandard, it's just not good enough for human consumption. So it definitely could be animal consumption, but it's just not good enough for maple syrup as we know it. What I found so funny about this grading system is that there's both subjective and objective terms. So the grading system is actually, it classifies the maple syrup depending on its transmittance at 560 nanometer wavelength through a 10 millimeter sample. So
I love that.
So golden must be 75% or more transmittance. Amber must be 50% to 74.9% transmittance. Dark must be 25 to 49.9%. And then very dark must be anything less than 25%.
It's like more strict than how we classify stars.
yeah, pretty much. It's like it's blue.
Love it's like you need to calibrate your filter. It's got to have this index of refraction, like this level of purity, like
it's like a diamond.
Exactly.
The liquid diamond.
Liquid diamond. But the problem is, when it comes to flavor, it's literally a subjective taste test. Like, does this taste right? It's so funny to me that it's like so scientific behind just like, oh, what is transmittance? What's the turbidity on this? But then as soon as it becomes like, oh, got to taste it, it's like, oh, it's got a strong taste to it.
Yeah, like imagine you put it through like that. Like I'm imagining a person up close with like that one of those like single eye magnifying glasses that diamond cutters use, and he's like, this checks, like it's a perfect specimen. And then someone just like sticks their finger in it, and they're like, tastes like shit, throw it out. Great.
Throw it out. Doesn't have strong taste. That's the history of maple syrup and grading system of maple syrup in a nutshell.
Fucking love it.
I love it. I love that food is becoming your
My brand.
Yeah, your expertise.
Yeah, Drew's a food historian.
I'm a food historian.
He's a foodie.
Okay, more fun stuff.
I'm so keen to know what your topic is, because I feel like it sounds like a person.
Amphisbaena.
It sounds really Australian. I'm transgender, Amphisbaena.
Okay, I will reiterate that this was only 6 clicks away from Waffles.
Okay.
And I know you don't even know what it is yet, but like with every new detail, you're going to be like, what the fuck? So my topic is the title is Amphisbaena.
Yep, Amphisbaena from down under. Is it Australian?
Actually, I don't know. No, I think, but it is all over the world. Okay. Let me just tell you what it is.
Okay.
It is a mythical beast, and the plural is Amphisbaena.
Amphisbaena.
Amphisbaena. Amphisbaena. Amphisbaena.
Wow. You should be Australian.
I was like singing. Daniel hated this, but I was like, watch me whip. Ampus
That's amazing.
He was like, don't do that.
Antispame. So good.
Okay. It is a mythical beast that I had never heard of, and I thought I knew most of the typical mythical beasts.
Hey, that's a rap. Typical mythical beast. Hey, typical.
I had not heard of this. So I was actually curious if you guys had, because it actually has a ton of pop culture references. You guys have never heard of this before.
No.
Okay, so let me just first tell you, before I even tell you what it is, it shows up in The Witcher.
Okay.
Did not know that. I think it's the books, right? Because The Witcher is based on some
books, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it shows up in The Witcher. Shows up in Castlevania.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, but the Castlevania depiction of it is actually incorrect, but it's the same word.
Okay.
Ooh, okay.
And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Is it one of the things that they have to battle?
I think so. I'm not really up to speed on the TMNT lore, but I did write down this particular sentence because I had to start and stop about 3 or 4 times because all right, this is the sentence.
Okay.
Big Mama had Michelangelo and Meat Sweats compete to feed the beast, to feed both of its heads. Let me just repeat that. Big Mama had Michelangelo and Meat Sweats compete to feed each of its heads.
Oh, is it in Harry Potter? Is it the double-headed dog?
No.
Or snake?
That's a Cerberus, or that's Cerberus.
Cerberus,
That's
yeah.
the double-headed
Cerberus.
Cerberus, thank you. Cerberus is the dog that guards the gates of hell. It is, and the snake is a basilisk.
I do remember the word basilisk now.
However, you're actually very close. So the description of an amphisbaena, it's actually a 2-headed snake, but not in the way that you think.
Oh, is it each end?
Yeah.
It's like cat dog. But
Yes. But 2 snakes.
Oh my gosh. So, okay.
Right. Okay. So
Okay.
it's what's interesting is that not only is it a 2-headed snake, and let's say an ambidirectional snake, but some depictions of it give it wings and chicken feet.
Where did the chicken feet? Is it in the middle of the snake? The feet?
Yes. Yeah.
Why? Who did that?
Well, a lot of people actually. Some of the other references of people who have mentioned or knew about an amphisbaena and worked it into their art were actually also Shelley, like Percy Bysshe Shelley, Alexander Pope, Lord Tennyson. So like people who write and are like, you know, in that whole like revival of like, oh, the Greeks and the myths and it's all beautiful and like amphisbaena, like that, they all did that too. Teasing out the history, I guess, of the amphisbaena was very interesting because I'm like telling you, you know, I'm using the word mythological or mythological beast, but it actually shows up in the year 1200 in the Aberdeen Bestiary. And so I actually went to the bestiary to be like, is this some kind of like weird
Mutant
this
thing?
is like, yeah, like I was like, you know, is the bestiary also just like a list of like, you know, horror story kind of thing? So the Aberdeen Bestiary was actually a list and description of many, many different animals that was actually, I don't know if it was commissioned by like any particular king, but it ended up in some prestigious libraries. And so this bestiary is things like, this is a fox, this is a raven, this is like, you know, a duck, this is all kinds of normal animals. But then they have things like dragons and basilisks and amphisbaenas and like illustrations. So part of my like intrigue was like, holy shit, did people think this was a real animal? Like what? Actually, let's like look at it from that angle rather than being like, here's this weird ugly dragon chicken with a snake butt. because that's kind of also what it is.
Did people think dragons were a real animal at one point in time, or were they always...
So I'm not an expert, and I say that because some people are super into dragons. And full disclosure, I was never one of those people. But I do think that kind of my take on this is like in the Aberdeen bestiary, these what we call mythical beings are cast alongside very regular animals with no distinction. It's not like there's a separate category that's like fucked up shit. It's like these are things that live.
Isn't that crazy? I think I've heard this as a conspiracy theory for why we've broken the whole idea of a multiverse, why we've broken into a different timeline, because we have records of mythical animals, or people believed in these mythical animals. It's like fair dinkum, and then all of a sudden we're like, no, that's not real. I don't believe it, but I think that is a fun little, like, we broke away from our timeline because we don't have dragons.
God, that's awesome.
Or an Amphispina.
Amphispina.
Amphispina. Did Amphispina have a gender? Or was it...
You mean Amphispina, you got to say the plural.
Oh, because it was... So, was it one of them...
it was not... It was a type of... The way that we have dragons, like a dragon is like a category.
Oh, Amphispina
it's not like,
is a category.
Yeah, Amphispina. And then where we say dragons, we say Amphispina, like the A-E at the end.
Okay, I see.
Amphispina.
Okay.
Yeah. So people thought Amphispina were real.
Love this. Maybe.
But like, I'm really glad you asked that question, because that was actually an angle that I was also taking looking at all of this. So I've written down kind of proof that people thought they were real and proof that people didn't. So as far as are they real, they are recorded not just in the Aberdeen bestiary, but they were also written about in, I don't know if you guys have heard of Pliny the Elder. Sometimes he comes up also in like medical contexts.
Yeah, I actually have, yeah.
Yeah, so Pliny the Elder was ancient Rome, I think, and he wrote basically about history, science, like everything. Like he was just like an intellectual from very old times. So in a book titled Naturalis Historia, so presumably natural history, Pliny the Elder described the Amphispinae. And I fucking love this description because it is doused in sarcasm.
Perfect.
He wrote, this is a direct quote from Pliny the Elder. The Amphispina has a twin head, that is, one at the tail end as well, as though it were not enough for poison to be poured out of one mouth.
That's so dramatic.
It's not enough that that poison's coming out of one mouth. It's got to come out the back mouth too.
The back mouth.
So that somebody, I guess, also presumably a little bit later, Claudius Aemilius wrote about Amphispinae in Characteristics of Animals. So again, like this kind of builds a little bit of evidence that these book titles to me sound like we're just describing real things in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Concerning.
I mean, not really. So there are like real present day historians who try to look back and think like, why did people have this impression, or what could they have possibly been observing and decided to describe this way. So, I do think that it's a classic case possibly of people just observing the natural world, observing strange things and trying to make sense of it. I mean, my own very personal headcanon is like, what if somebody saw a two-headed snake, went and told their friend about it, and their friend just got it wrong?
Yes, two heads, each end. Well, yeah. Totally, because you see people freaking out over... like there was a pig that was born with two heads, and things get born with two heads all the time, like Siamese twins, right? So you can imagine back in the day, someone sees one of them slithering around and is like, that is mythical. Yeah.
Yeah. Although again, like it's not like the two heads were on what we would call the front. I want to keep talking about why I think people really thought they existed for reals, because there was an entire category about folk medicine that can be practiced with Amphispinae.
Oh, like parts of the Amphispinae, or just like...
Yeah, how to use an Amphispina in your at-home folk
Medicines?
remedies for whatever ails you. Mhm.
Of course.
Yeah. So a pregnant woman is very vulnerable, and a lot can go wrong when you're pregnant. And so the best way to assure that she has a safe pregnancy is to put a live two-headed snake around her neck.
Oh my god.
That's rule number 1. Jot that down. A
Writing that
live amphisbaena around the neck of a pregnant woman ensures that she has a safe pregnancy. Of course, to cure arthritis or the common cold, just wear its skin. You don't have to go all out. Just wear its skin. If you eat its meat, making use of the entire amphisbaena, you could attract lovers or lovers' favor. And if you are pure of heart and of mind and you kill an amphisbaena on a full moon, you get powers.
Oh, just magic powers. You've unlocked the next level.
You've got powers. Wow. But I want to tell you guys my favorite use of amphisbaena in medicine. I'm not making this up. Lumberjacks. Lumberjacks suffering from the cold can nail an amphisbaena to a tree, and not only will they stay warm, but the tree will also fall easier.
What? I don't understand.
That makes as much sense as Big Mama and meat sweats.
Yeah.
Often overlooked in folk medicine.
So apparently there's a few different breeds of snakes that imitate having a head on each end. So their tail is coloured the same way as their head.
Interesting.
So predators they don't know if they're coming or if they're going.
Very interesting.
They're just not sure. So I wonder if that's where it kind of come from, is like humans seeing them and being like, ooh, that's a two-headed snake.
That is very fascinating. I did not find
And then it
that.
just kind of escalated.
Yeah. Because you know what's funny too is that it is like a characteristic that is defined of the amphisbaena that both heads are capable of independent thought. It's not like one of them leads.
Ooh.
So it's interesting the way that kind of like starts to color itself in. Do you guys know historically who debunked the amphisbaena?
Oh, don't tell me. Is it the same guy who debunked the Cockling ghost?
Not the Cockling ghost guy, but
Is it Mad King George?
it's actually very related to the Cockling ghost guy. The Cockling ghost guy debunked Sir Thomas Browne, but Sir Thomas Browne debunked the amphisbaena.
Wow.
Isn't that fucking wild? I came across his name while I was reading the wiki article, and I was like, why is that name clicked on? And then I was like, fucking tell me that's the wild... No, not the wild. That was the other episode. Tell me that is the lozenge guy. It was the motherfucking lozenge
Fucking
guy.
lozenge guy.
So he spent his life writing a manifesto love letter to lozenges or diamonds or whatever the shape is, and debunking the amphisbaena.
Yep.
What a life.
I do think it's very suspicious, though. The wiki article was like, there's nothing that... Like, the wiki article flagged that fact and was like, there are no facts to support this. So maybe somebody's watching me and was like, I'm going to fuck with her and I'm going to put this in just half a sentence. And years from now, that sentence won't even be there in Wikipedia anymore. But as of today, that is what it said, unfounded.
It's in there.
Yes.
Wow.
And you know what's fucked?
Wow.
Is this was another one of those articles. This happened to me with our very first episode when we talked about Madame Palatine. I said that I chose her because of her portrait. I looked at her photo.
Picture, yeah.
Painting, yeah. And I was
whatever.
like, oh, that's really interesting.
The etching, the terrifying etching.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yes, that was part of it, but it was her older photo that caught my attention. That is how I landed on amphisbaena, actually, was I ended up going through medieval cuisine, and then from medieval cuisine got to something called misericords, which I had never heard of, but misericord is something that you can like basically like a ledge on a fold-up chair that you can sit on. Like it's basically just like a very fancy ledge. And there were, at the bottom of the wiki article, loads of pictures of really ornate misericords. And the one that I thought was beautiful and caught my attention was a depiction of an amphisbaena. And I was like, what the fuck is that? So I swear to you, I was like nowhere near lozenges and somehow ended up like really right next to it. Everything's
Right
connected.
next to it.
So what I wanted to put in a little Drew section.
Yay.
There is actually a group called Amphisbaenia.
Okay.
So group, getting into biology. So just as a refresher, maybe this is like high school bio for some people, but you have like order, group, genus, species, like as part of like the taxonomy. So when I say group, I mean like the taxonomy group.
Oh, okay.
Group Amphisbaenia. Okay. Why did I end up clicking on Amphisbaenia? That was not the link in the wiki article I clicked on. No. I clicked on the words worm lizards. Like a flashing hyperlink neon sign was like, first I saw lumberjacks and then I saw worm lizards.
Do you know what's funny? I've been through worm lizards. I forgot what topic it was for, but I've definitely been through worm lizards because I almost stopped.
I don't know how you didn't stop because that's what I'm also going to talk about. Worm lizards are fucking wild. The group is called Amphisbaenia. And just to kind of give you like a very brief overview of their appearance, they're basically like scaly earthworms. So they don't have any legs. Yeah. They're just really like almost something between a snake and an earthworm. They're about 6 inches long or less. They're pretty small. Mm-hmm. I'm going to talk a little bit about their evolution, but they lost their legs independently of snakes. So you look at them and think like, oh, they're similar to snakes. Oh. No, they lost their legs completely independently.
Wow.
And kind of a bit like an earthworm. They burrow into the dirt. They live underground in an accordion motion. So kind of fucking sick. And when they're down there in the dirt, they are motherfucking carnivores. They are wild. The wiki article specifically said that they consume large chunks of their prey with powerful interlocking teeth and a powerful jaw.
Oh, is it like the worm from Dune with the circular teeth?
That's what I imagined, but actually in the spoilers channel, I posted a picture of their skeleton. And you can see that they have real...
That's what it is?
Yeah. Fang-like interlocking teeth. It's just every single one of their teeth looks like a fang and a very pronounced jawbone.
Oh my god. I thought this was like fan art of Predator.
I think you mean Alien, but...
That is absolutely a lizard worm. So again, I realize that it's kind of confusing to say the words lizard worm because one has legs and one doesn't. But the Amphisbaenia, as I was saying, do not have legs. And I want to leave you with a stunning impression of how people think these things evolved. So I'm going to talk about genetic diversity. No.
There it is.
Yes.
No, I'm talking about evolution.
I couldn't do it in maple syrup.
I'm mostly talking about evolution, but I mean, it's all...
Drew's glowing. He's so happy.
He's glowing like a big worm lizard sign in my heart. So the thing is, the Amphisbaenia, like I said, they're worms. Okay, they don't have legs, and I was gushing before that they did this independently of worms. I'm sorry, of snakes not having legs. They live practically all over the planet. Like when you were saying, do they live in Australia? No, they don't live in Australia, but they live in North America, Europe, Africa, South America, the Middle East, and the Caribbean. So they live all over the planet.
And did they evolve differently in every place on the planet?
So here we fucking go. This is exactly the pinnacle of why this is fascinating. So people originally thought, okay, they ended up all over the world. So they probably originated during like Pangea. And then when Pangea broke apart, that's how they ended up everywhere.
Yeah.
This is not how it happened. 100 million years ago, the continents had shifted such that the Atlantic Ocean looks the way we know it today. It was about the size that it is today. Amphisbaenia evolved 107 million years ago. People think they originated in North America 107 million years ago. But essentially what had to have happened is that some of the Amphisbaenia from North America crossed the Atlantic Ocean, ended up in Europe, evolved in Europe a little bit, and then it went from Europe, crossed the Atlantic Ocean again to South America. And all three independent populations independently evolved to lose their legs, which is not only crazy that three different populations did that, but also people generally think that you evolve to have legs, not to lose legs. So it goes against what people generally think of as like forward moving in evolution, but also cross the motherfucking Atlantic Ocean twice and independently co-evolved three different populations to create Amphisbaenia.
This needs to be a Disney children's movie. The Adventure of Amphisbaenia.
Scar children.
The idea is that they didn't even know that they were really crossing the Atlantic, because at first I was like, does that mean they just accordion burrowed across the Atlantic Ocean twice? The reason all of these times that I was mentioning are important is because they think that they diversified in like Europe like 40 to 50 million years ago, and then South America 40 million years ago. So this is like definitely when the Atlantic Ocean was like fully formed. But still,
like a big fucking ocean.
Yeah. So people think that what happened was these guys were living their subterranean lives, and something called rafting happened, oceanic rafting, which is where like really violent weather breaks off chunks of like a coast or something, and that like island just floats in the ocean until it eventually hits the other side. So the idea is that they were probably just underground for the whole thing, had no idea that they were in the middle of the ocean.
Had no idea.
Yeah. And so my favorite, just to really seal the deal, ended on a high note. People ask the question, well, then how could they have survived in such drastically different places with no predators? You're going to have to look under the Yucatan Peninsula for the answer to that question.
Ooh.
The same asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, they think killed all of their natural predators.
Oh my god. That's amazing. I mean, poor dinosaurs, but good on the Amphisbaenia. They got to survive.
I think that like the real group of them is so much cooler than the mythical beast.
Yeah. The fact that they survived against all odds for 100 million years, right?
Yep. And it evolved the ways that they had to, evolved basically together.
Wow.
I don't know. They seem like the best parts of snakes and worms put together for me, which is a real soft spot in my heart.
I really like snakes and worms.
I really like them. And I love teeth. And these guys have some gorgeous specimens of teeth. That's the Amphisbaenia, and Amphisbaenia, all told.
Amphisbaenia. That is incredible.
I have two things about this that I have questions about.
Good.
One, Amphisbaenia, putting that around your neck as a pregnant woman, and they're poisonous. So one, they're because according to that one, or I forget who it was,
Pliny
the Elder.
Yep.
Pliny, that's the one. He said they're poisonous.
Yep.
So either they're poisonous or they're constrictors, and both of those things don't work around your neck.
Or they could just bite you a lot, right? Like, when I explained this to Daniel, I was so excited about this topic. I had to immediately spill the beans to somebody, and the closest person to me was Daniel. And Daniel made sense of this because he would make a great old-timey doctor. He was like, no, they just clasp. They bite each other, and it's a necklace clasp.
It's like an
So then
Ouroboros.
they bite predators to the woman to protect her.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even tell you. Oh my God, where they come from. I skipped a whole fucking paragraph. It's the mythological origin of them is that when Perseus after he killed the Gorgon, like Medusa, and was carrying her
Yeah.
head, when he crossed the Libyan desert, the idea is that a drop of blood dripped from her head and fell into the sand, and that was the origin. So kind of like the way that Medusa's head snakes protect her, I kind of do feel like it's like, I mean, I still think it's a hilariously bad idea to put a double-headed snake around a pregnant woman's neck. And I forgot to also mention that the mythological Amphisbaena eats ants. That's what it was.
Fuck yeah.
Why? It's a mythological. They could have made it eat whatever it wanted. They could have given it a good diet.
No, it eats.
Not. Wow.
Well, what's
okay.
amazing is like
Ants.
it grows up from Medusa's blood, and then they're like, it lived in the desert because this war came through and it just ate all the corpses. And then they're like, oh, but it like mostly eats ants.
It's pretty tame.
It's like, it's
Okay.
not pregnant women. Like, not on that list.
There you go. So,
What was your second
my second
question?
thing, I guess it's not really a question, but I guess from our perspective, as we look at ourselves as like the highest evolution, that we having legs makes it seem like, oh, why would you lose your legs? That's like we lose all your mobility. And so that made me think that like having that perspective may have like tainted the evolutionary idea of these lizard snakes or lizard worms. What are they? Lizard worms? That like maybe we
Yes.
had looked at them and been like, oh, they can't be evolved because they don't have legs, but we're like, they actually are evolved because they lost their legs. I don't know. It's just
They're in
it's
their
super cool to
highest
me.
form. Because I guess why do you need legs if you don't have predators? That's a lot of energy to grow a leg. Save that.
Well, so the direct quote from the wiki article is that limblessness evolved independently 3 times, a finding that contrasts the morphological theory that limbed and Amphisbaenians are the most basal.
Oh. So how I would interpret that is that we look at it as like, oh, why would you lose your limbs? But, you know, that's just evolution. Like maybe they didn't, I mean, Sarah's point that they didn't need them, but I mean, maybe their movement was more efficient without legs. Maybe, you know, worms don't need legs. You
Yeah.
know, snakes don't need legs.
Snakes can run faster than I can with their little worm bodies.
Worm bodies. Wow. Thank you for this. This is great. This is great.
Amphisbaena.
Amphisbaena.
Amphisbaena. Alrighty, are you guys ready to learn about corpse medicine?
Yes!
Absolutely.
So, I'm going to specifically talk about one type of corpse medicine, which is mummia, which is the eating of mummies. But it is a wild ride. Have you heard of the myth? Or not the myth, it's, you know, a lot of the time you might hear in a meme that the Victorians ate mummies.
Oh,
You
for
heard
sure.
about that? Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So I always thought that maybe that was exaggerated. I was like, oh yeah, it's probably some rich old fucks stole and ate mummies, sure. Did not realise that it was a thriving market for hundreds of years. So I'm going to go into that adventurous history now.
Fantastic.
So for anyone who's listening who might not know, for several hundred years, many Europeans, including royalties, priests, scientists, and other noble people of education, routinely ingested the remedies containing human bones, blood, and fat as legitimate medicine, and they thought it could cure everything from headaches to epilepsy. So already we're off to a great start.
Wow.
I'm ready for this panacea.
Okay, so you might be asking why. I too was like, okay, yeah, like how did we get to this? We've got to ingest human bones to fix things. How did we get to that?
I mean, we watched people do the cinnamon challenge. Like, I'm not really asking why, because I know people will eat
People do
anything.
dumb shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, people eat Tide Pods.
Yeah.
I'm like, so I'm like, the leap is not that great.
The forbidden fruit.
Exactly. I'm like, at least this is maybe edible.
Maybe, yeah. And so I thought maybe it was going to come from, you remember back when I talked about the anatomy of melancholy, about the 4 humors that we have, well, that the ancient, or the, sorry, not the ancient, the medieval and Victorian scholars thought that our body was made out of 4 different humours or 4 different biles. And, you know, if you got an imbalance in your biles, you might be unhappy or too happy or whatever it might be. So I thought that maybe it was jumping from that. Maybe they thought if you were to ingest something from another human who had like balanced humours or biles, maybe that was to help you. That's where I was thinking.
I love that theory.
Thank you. I thought that would have been like a logical thing. It wasn't a logical leap. It actually seems that the notion of eating mummies or eating human remains came from a bit of a dodgy translation between cultures. Originally, the Arabic word mamiya, which referred to asphalt or bitumen, so it referred to black tar type substance. And the reason they called it that was they used to use it on humans as kind of a cure-all. So it was this natural substance. It could either be bitumen or tar, bitumen, tar, or asphalt, kind of that realm of those type of rocks. You know, typically soft, black, tarry material, and it was kind of, again, like a cure-all. So you've got a cut on your leg, or maybe you've broken a bone. We'll apply some mamiya to you. You've got an upset tummy or something like that. Don't worry, we'll mix up some mamiya and in a drink, and you'll drink it and it will make you feel better.
They would eat tar?
Yeah. Yeah.
What?
Which I don't think is better than human. I don't know. I'm in mixed minds. But that is what the word mamiya meant, was this tarry black substance. So nothing to do with humans yet. And again, so in a lot of Islamic cultures, it was used for cuts and bruises, fractures, any internal problems. Any problem you think of, you whack some mamiya on it or in it, and you're good to go.
Okay.
And that was like that for a few hundred years. And the confusion didn't happen until all of a sudden we've got the Crusades going on in Europe. So we've got the Christian Europeans trying to invade other areas. We've got cultures mixing for the first time. And they started to get confused because they had heard of this thing called mamiya. They had seen it be used on injured soldiers and injured people. They just assumed that it came from the term mummies because they had heard that term before. They had heard of ancient mummies before.
Oh my God.
And it was a bit of a mix-up because now I was like, how the fuck do you mix that up? Like, okay, a mummy and mamiya, it sounds similar, but black tar and a human corpse, different.
Yeah.
Different. Spot the difference. But it turns out it's actually not so crazy. So they were running out of natural areas where they could collect asphalt and other tar that they could use. And they discovered that in a particular era of Egyptian mummification, they started using tars, bitumen, and asphalt basically to fill in organ crevices.
Oh,
so
shit.
They would, yeah. So they were doing the full-on autopsy. So they would do the full mummification process where they would remove all the organs. They would basically try and embalm using what they had, their different embalming fluids. And then to pack crevices, they would use tar, bitumen, or asphalt. So they would put this mamiya, which were known in Arabic, would be put in the mummies. And so when they would, in desperate times, they needed this cure-all, they were stealing it from the crevices of mummies. So it wasn't like they were eating the mummies. They weren't just eating the mummies. They were taking the tar from the mummy. And this got confused because the Europeans saw them doing this.
Oh no.
The Europeans saw them doing this. The Europeans couldn't really tell the difference from what I've read. They didn't understand the difference between the mummified remains and this substance that everyone was calling mamiya that was coming out of them. And we see here where the mix-up happened.
That is a real honest mistake.
It's a mistake. It is. And it just someone saw it and was like, that's what we do, that's what we need. And it just escalated for hundreds of years.
So none of the Arabic speaking people were like, whoa, freak, whoa, 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 whoa. We don't do that. Like, like one thought to correct them?
No, there were some scholars that were recorded as saying we thought it was peculiar, but each to their own. Like, I mean, we're here taking the mumia out of the corpses. Like, I don't know. Like, so people were definitely sus on it, and I'll get to that a little later on, because some people were like, are we sure?
It's like the moment that one of them calls out the other, then the other one can turn around and be like, okay, but you're doing fucked up shit too. And then it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, best if we all just, that's like a war of attrition, I guess. We're both just like, I'm not gonna
I'm not gonna say anything. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, you're right.
It's a big business. They were making money. People were making money from it. Severe amounts of money. And so, yeah, just kind of, you can totally see how the mistake happened and how it perpetuated. And so the next thing you know, you've got these white Europeans who are munching on mummies like it's a fine jerky to cure everything.
Oh my god.
And I've written here, I wrote, so really, they just accidentally ate a little further than they needed to go around.
A matter of like a couple inches, like to the left or right.
Yeah. So we're getting to my favorite part of this whole story. And this is so, honest mistake has happened. People are confused. We still think it's a cure-all. And of course, anything that's going to cure you back in the day of plague, disease, injury, like very low life expectancy, why not? Give it a shot. And the greatest part is that the giant leaps and bounds that educated people, mainly white men, were taking to try and explain why this human flesh is so good for you are just like chef's kiss. They're excellent.
The like cartwheels or gymnastics of being like, no,
It's right. We're doing it right.
Exactly. So I've got a couple of great quotes that I would like to share. So one of these big leaps came from an Italian surgeon named Divago. And so he tried to define, so he used this mumia, he would prescribe this mumia and use it in his practices. And he tried to define and explain it to patrons of his as, it's the flesh of the dead. And, if this body has been embalmed and it's not too hot and not too dry, therefore it probably still has some virtue. So it's probably still got some health in it. And, why not just transfer that into our living bodies? As long as it's not too hot, not too dry, not too crunchy.
But that's kind of,
she'll be right.
That's kind of what you were thinking, though. Like, why it works.
Yeah, I would be a really good medieval doctor at making the biggest leaps and bounds. Yeah. So, like, Divago, I mega paraphrased any of his quotes there, but I guess he had this idea of, well, if it came from a healthy person, it probably is healthy. Who cares? Eat your mumia.
Yeah, but that person's dead. So clearly it didn't come from a healthy person. They fucking died.
No. Well, it gets so another polymath, a Swiss German polymath, so kind of like an educated man about everything, called Paracelsus. So he tried to explain that it would only work, mumia would only work to cure you if the body of a man who did not die of a natural death, but rather died of an unnatural death.
This is my point.
Was preserved.
Yes, mm-hmm. I agree with this man.
Okay,
Good
yeah.
German
because
sensibility.
you need the healthy body. So yeah, they're kind of on it. They're like, well, if they're healthy, if they died healthy, it's got some logic. And obviously, because otherwise, if they didn't, then it wouldn't have the healing properties. And they thought that they were seeing people get healed. So obviously something was happening. I don't know whether it was just a major placebo effect or people weren't actually that sick. But they were convinced that it actually really worked.
It's kind of funny to hear you be like, they don't know why it worked. It just did. And like half an hour ago, Drew was like, we don't know why maple syrup tastes good, but it does.
It tastes so good, but it does.
We have come a long way and a short way all in one. So I wanted to ask you guys, what do you think of when you find Like, if you were going to go on an adventure to try find some ancient Egyptian mummies, what do you think you would find when you uncovered them?
Leathery smiles.
That's very accurate. Do you have anything else to add, Drew? Do you both think it would be a moist environment?
Oh, no, it'd be dry as hell.
Okay, yeah. So, a German physician did have to clarify. You're wanting the dry, dusty bits. Do not drink the liquid matter that's found at the bottom of these burial sites, because people were doing bad things. And I think
Drew, let me just describe what Drew just did. And then his word, because he just like shot back in his chair and covered his mouth with both hands. Like all of his fingertips were on his lips.
I think I know why you did that, Drew. Are you thinking about a couple years ago they unearthed that giant black sarcophagus?
What are you talking about?
The people were like across the internet were like, drink the liquid. Like, they were.
What are you talking? Okay, Am I the only person who didn't know that there was any liquid in sarcophagi?
I'm getting it for you. Well, it depends where you get your sarcophagi from, because some of them, if they've been buried, if they're a noble person who's had a decent burial, they're probably not under the water table or under where the sewage runs. Oh. If you were a poorer person, though, you got buried wherever, or,
where the sewage runs?
Yeah, all that good stuff. So some of them you find and they are juicy. I'm putting it in the spoilers now. So this is what I think Drew was thinking about. This giant sarcophagus was found, and like 3 or 4 bodies were in it. And when they opened it, there was like disgusting looking red liquid.
Drew, this looks exactly like Drew's picture that he posted up above of the maple syrup process.
No!
That's grade A amber. The bottom of that sarcophagus has grade A amber.
Grade A amber?
Oh, God. So just imagine, bottom of a sarcophagus, we got disgusting liquid in there. Now, only 2 years ago, when this was found, 21st century, thousands of people on the internet were petitioning the archaeologists to save the forbidden juice because they wanted to drink it because they thought it was going to be the elixir of life. It was sewage. It was literal shit juice.
They thought it was the elixir of life. This wasn't people like memeing, like people were really serious.
I think it started as a meme and it just escalated.
I feel like that's everything.
Some people were deadly serious. And so, yeah, that's what that German physician back in the day, hundreds of years ago, was trying to warn. Like, you just can't eat anything, kids. You've got to really consider what your mumia is. But basically, the gist was that people had their own, like, medical practice around it. Like, you should only eat this, you shouldn't drink that, they need to be like this. They had their own prescriptions of what type of mumia you needed to eat. And so, for a good couple hundred years, this mumia substance was in severely hot demand because it really was this kind of like cure-all. Think of it as like Tylenol or aspirin today. Like, you don't feel well, you have a Tylenol. It was, you don't feel well, eat some mumia.
Everyone was a cannibal.
Yeah, the Europeans they were cannibals for sure. A lot of them, especially the upper class and wealthier ones who could actually afford this.
But you know what's funny is that they were literally eating the rich, because those were the only people who would have been dry coffins.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a gray market for mummy.
There, I'm so glad you unlocked my secret level.
Oh my God.
So, you can probably imagine there was only so many mummies. Sure, there was a good few hundred, maybe thousands. We're not exactly sure how many mummies there would have been in ancient Egypt 600, 700, 800 years ago when it started to be like taken advantage of by the Europeans, basically. No idea how many mummies there were, but we know that there probably would have been quite a few, because there was thousands of years of different dynasties and ruling cultures. And we know that from the tombs that were not disturbed, the amount of mummies and like close family that were preserved. So we think there was a lot, but not enough for the Europeans, because all of a sudden grey markets and black markets were basically popping up, and not just in Egypt, they were happening in France as well. So I'll get to this story a little later on, but basically people were selling not legitimate mummy for consumption.
Black market mummy.
I'll jump to the reason we know this was actually from some writings from Ambrose Prayer, and he worked as a barber surgeon under Henry II, which is a throwback to a couple of episodes when I talked about Henry II. Now, do you guys know what a barber surgeon is?
Yeah, fuck yeah, we do.
Surgery or a haircut?
Do you want to explain for the audience?
Is that really what it is?
Legit, yes.
It's literally just a guy and or girl who does both surgeries and or barbershop stuff, so they could be both.
Yeah, that's quite literally it. They've got the sharp knives.
They do, and sharp knives were a commodity, very expensive back in the day. And it was cheaper for you to bring your barber / your surgeon if you were going crusading or adventuring, whatever you were doing. It was cheaper for you as a royal or a nobleman to bring your barber with you, as possibly we might need you as a surgeon, than it was to have a trained doctor or physician. So barber surgeons were amazing. They did a lot of shit that they probably did not need to do. But he actually worked straight under Henry II. So again, throwback to a couple of episodes. Henry II was a king of France. Now, so Ambrose, he travelled quite extensively around Europe, and I think he even made some travels to Egypt. And he's written in some of his accounts that he basically saw firsthand the manufacturing of fake mammalia. And this was called mammalia phallis because it was fake mummy. And the way that it happened, I was like, oh, okay, maybe they were using other animals or things. No, you needed your human. So in France, what was happening was that there was like some apothecaries would end up stealing the bodies of executed criminals, because they used to have public executions back in the day, or they would take the bodies of people who had completed suicide in the city. So they would take the bodies of those that were just kind of around. They would then dry them in an oven and then sell the flesh as if it was mammia.
Oh my god.
Would they embalm them, or was it purely just like they just roast them?
Oh, no, I think they wanted to like just make them dry, basically like jerkify them, make it look like they had been. I don't think they would embalm them. So that was in France. So this was kind of the fake mammia that was coming out of France. In Egypt, there were merchants who basically admitted to collecting dead bodies of people who had passed very recently, and then preparing the mammia, trying to follow a more traditional Egyptian preparation method.
They tried to be honest.
Yeah, they tried to be honest, but you know, they were making money. So they're like, these idiots, okay, sure, these dum-dums are going to come here, steal our bodies, we're going to sell them and make some money. And one of the Egyptians is quoted as saying, "They're so dainty mouthed they could eat the body of the dead," as trying to explain what Christians were. You know, they've got such dainty mouths, they're very hoity-toity, and yet here they are munching on the dead.
Literally, like, that's
Wow.
like what I was about to say is like, how can you draw the line at modern mummies? Like, it's like, oh, this isn't my authentic dead body, this is a fresh dead body. You know what I mean?
I know.
What I was thinking about, you remember how in the coffee episode, how they wouldn't drink coffee until it was proclaimed to be a Christian drink? Imagine just like that is what they like, oh, I'm turned off by that. I won't drink this, but then fucking dead bodies, they'll eat that with no problem. Like, I don't know.
Do you think the Pope had to sanction Mamiya?
I don't know.
Oh my god.
Do you think the Pope took Mamiya?
Oh.
We're gonna get canceled.
So Ambrose, the man who worked under Henry II, so after hearing these stories and seeing things firsthand, he full on put a ban. He stopped prescribing Mamiya to any of his patients, and he was a big proponent for not super convinced that this works. Maybe we should not. So that was very good of him. There were some other people though who were really into it. One of them was the 17th century legend of physics, chemistry, and the scientific method. His name was Robert Boyle. Do you guys know Boyle or Boyle's Law?
Boyle's Law is ringing a bell, but...
Yeah. So he was basically, he was a physicist / chemist, worked a lot with gases and pressure, came up with Boyle's Law. Super smart man.
Yes.
And he's actually one of the founders of this modern day idea of having a hypothesis, testing the hypothesis, like the scientific method that we use to this day. So a scientific man, very, very smart. And he is quoted as saying that Mamiya is one of the most useful medicines, and it's commended, highly commended, and given by our physicians for all sorts of causes, from falls to bruises, and in other cases too. This is happening for, hundreds of years. Few to several hundred years by this stage. And so most of the mummies were being eaten up. If we were starting to enter in the 19th century this early stages of modern medicine, where we started to have some vague idea of what was happening in the human body. We realized that there wasn't 4 humors, we didn't have black bile, we were starting to have a little bit of grasp on medicine, and so the use of it actually started to die out, thank fuck. But it was still available for medical purchase from one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the 20th century until 1924.
What?
It's a little too modern for me.
Way too modern. Less than 100 years ago, you could still buy prescribed Mamiya.
I wonder if it's just one of those things that everybody kind of agreed we're not going to do that anymore, and then somebody finally turned around and was like, oh, we didn't outlaw that. we should just put a lid on that.
Pack that down tight.
Yeah, let's make sure that doesn't come back.
So to wrap up, if you're anything like me, you probably wanted to know how much mummy did the Victorians actually eat, and it turns out it was most likely tons. Literal tons. So just one recorded story was about the import of 600 pounds of Mamiya by one importer to the UK from Egypt. And that was just one import. So my final question that you might be waiting for is, what did it taste like?
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Not good. So it was prescribed as dusty powders that you would then mix in with other stuff. So it probably was not tasty at all, not much of anything. But yeah, you'd have to mix it in with food or drinks, or you'd make a paste and slap it on your body. But I thought I'd just finalize by highlighting some of the books that I've read sections of that were excellent. If you want to read more about how insane the Europeans were. There's one called Medicinal Cannibalism in the Early Modern English Literature and Culture, and that's by Louise Noble. There's another one called Mummies, Cannibals and Vampires, The History of Corpse Medicine from the Renaissance to the Victorians, and that's by Richard Sugg.
Thank you, Sarah. Those titles alone are freaking awesome.
Great?
Yes.
I'm sold.
Were you at all tempted to taste it after reading this?
No.
It's okay to say, yeah, I'll cut it out.
No. No, it made me feel very gross and uncomfortable, but I could not stop reading because I'm like, this is insane.
This is making me feel.
Yeah, it's making me feel something. What about you two? If you were back in the day and you had like a migraine and someone said, here.
Even now, like, aren't you a little curious?
No.
A little bit. Yeah. I'm a little curious. Yeah. I wonder if people snorted it.
That's a great question because it used to. I think we've talked about snuff boxes a little bit before. They used to have boxes very similar to a snuff box. That was your Mamiya box. So I don't know if people snorted it because you could like mix it with things, make paste, ointments. I would be willing to bet. I bet someone snorted it.
Probably
at least once.
Yeah.
I'm actually just thinking about all the little trinket boxes we think are trinket boxes and wondering if they were actually Mamiya boxes. Well, that was fucked. Thank you, Sarah.
Yes, thank you.
Glad you liked it.
Man, you guys are all fucked up. Thank you, everybody, for listening, especially if you kept listening this far. As always, like, we love you so much. Come hang out with us anywhere that you get your social media or your social fix. You are always welcome in our Discord. We would really, really love it if you would join us on our Patreon because we are spending so much fun, giggly time designing stickers and goodies and all kinds of levels and rewards for you guys. You are also able at the lowest tier to opt out of any ads in your listening. We hate capitalism too, so we made it as cheap as physically possible to get rid of ads. And if Patreon's not really your thing, you can always just like and subscribe. You can write us some comments, you can write us some reviews. Everything helps. Truly everything helps, and it really makes our day to see what you guys are thinking and how all the weird stuff we learn penetrates into your life.
Wow.
Oh my vapors.
Oh my vapors.
As always, we love Robin.
We love Robin.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Germans, they make good. I don't know. Cut that out.